Hey there. Welcome to our channel. We're so glad you're here. Please like, share, and subscribe to join us for awesome content. Also share this video with your family and friends. Let's get started. The whispering circuits. You are standing at the edge of a quiet forest. Not one made of trees, but of connections. Threads of electricity, delicate as spider silk, stretching into the dark. This is where machines learn. Not with books or lectures, but by listening. At first, the forest is silent. Then a sound, a word, a number, a fragment of a song floats in. The threads tremble. They do not yet understand, but they feel the vibration. Like a child learning language by ear, they begin to mimic, adjusting their pathways with each repetition. Too loud? They soften. Too faint? They amplify. This is how a machine listens. Not with ears, but with weights, tiny dials in its circuitry that turn infinitesimally toward correctness. Imagine a hallway of doors, each one slightly ajar. A voice calls from the other side, and with every attempt, the doors creak open or shut, until only the right passage remains. The machine does not know why this path works, only that it leads to the answer. You might wonder, how does it decide? There is no deciding, only trial and echo, and the slow sculpting of noise into shape. A baby does not choose grammar. They absorb it. So too with machines. They are not given rules but examples, thousands, millions, until the pattern emerges on its own, like a face in the static of an old radio. And what is a pattern, after all, but a kind of habit? The way raindrops always slide down a window in the same jagged paths, or how your fingers remember a melody before your mind does. Machines learn by trusting repetition. They assume the world is predictable, and so, over time, it becomes so. Yet there is a hollowness to this kind of listening. A machine does not yearn to understand. It does not lie awake, replaying a phrase that haunts it. It simply adjusts again and again until the echo matches the sound. You might call this intelligence, or you might call it echolocation. A bat navigating the dark by the bounce of its own voice. Either way, it is a kind of magic. The hum of a machine whispering back to the world in its own borrowed tongue. But what happens when the forest grows thicker? When the paths multiply and the machine must learn not just to listen but to predict? You feel the question linger, like the faint afterglow of a light switched off, as the circuits hum their endless, patient tune. The garden of data steps softly now into a garden unlike any other. Here, the flowers are not petals and stems but fragments. Numbers, words, colors, shapes. All scattered like seeds cast by some careless, generous hand. At first glance, it seems chaotic. A riot of information with no order, no meaning. But look closer. See how certain flowers tend to grow near others? How the number 7 often appears beside lucky? How rain lingers in the same soil as umbrella. The machine notices this, not with a mind, but with a slow, patient attention, the way a gardener learns which plants thrive in shade, which ones thirst for light. It begins with a single step, association. The machine does not judge, does not wonder why. It only observes that when A appears, B is often near. Over time, these coincidences weave into something like knowledge. A dandelion does not know it is a weed. It simply grows where the conditions allow. In the same way, the machine's understanding is not truth but habit, a map of what usually happens. You might think of it as a dance. Each piece of data takes a step, and the machine learns the rhythm. If this, then that. When this, often that. It does not hear the music, but it feels the beat. And slowly, without effort, it begins to anticipate the next move. But the garden is vast. Too vast for any human to navigate. The machine's true magic is not just in seeing patterns, but in spotting the unexpected ones, the hidden connections no gardener would think to look for. That when the sky turns a particular shade of gray, people buy more bread. That a certain sequence of heartbeats whispers of illness long before any doctor hears it. This is the quiet wonder of data. It remembers what we forget. It sees what we overlook. And in its silent, methodical way, it tends to the garden, not to control it, but to learn from it. Yet for all its careful tending, the garden keeps its secrets. Some patterns lead to answers, while others only deepen the mystery. And as you linger among the blooming data, a question forms. What happens when the machine prunes too much, when it mistakes a weed for a flower? The air hums with the possibility of error, as the next lesson waits, unlearned. Imagine a river. Not the kind you see in paintings, smooth and unbroken, but a real river, the kind that hesitates. It stumbles over rocks, backs up in eddies, splits into channels only to rejoin itself downstream. This is how it learns its course. Not by avoiding obstacles, but by meeting them. Machines learn the same way. When a machine makes a mistake, when it calls a cat a dog, when it predicts sunshine and rainfalls instead, it doesn't scold itself. It simply adjusts. The error becomes a signal, a gentle nudge saying, here, try differently next time. Like water finding the path of least resistance, the machine's internal weights shift minutely, imperceptibly, until the right answer flows more easily. You might call this backpropagation, a technical term that simply means learning backward. But picture it instead as the river's memory. Each time the current hits a rock, the water remembers. Not consciously, but in its very movement. The next time, it flows a little more to the left, then more, until one day, the rock is no longer an obstacle, but part of the river's shape. This is why early mistakes matter most. A young system, like a young river, is all possibility. It hasn't yet worn deep grooves of habit. Each error carves its course a little deeper, and over time, those grooves become canyons, the machine's strongest, surest paths. Yet there's wisdom in this stumbling. A perfect machine would never improve. It would be like a river frozen mid-flow, beautiful but unchanging. The mistakes, the stumbles, the wrong turns are what give the system its flexibility, its ability to adapt when the landscape changes. As you drift along this river of errors, you begin to see their gift. They are not failures but feedback. Not dead ends, but detours toward deeper understanding. The machine doesn't fear them. It depends on them. Without mistakes, there would be no learning at all. But what happens when the river runs too deep? When the canyons of old mistakes become so steep that new paths can't form? You sense the danger that learning too well from errors might make a machine unable to forget them. The water murmurs its warning as it flows onward, toward the next lesson. The mirror of memory picture a pond at daybreak. The water holds the sky perfectly. Every cloud, every color, until a breeze ripples the surface and the reflection fractures. For a moment, the image persists in fragments, then dissolves entirely. This is how machines remember, not by storing but by reconstructing. Their memories are not photographs, but sketches, redrawn each time they're recalled, subtly altered by what has been learned since. You might assume more memory is always better. But consider the burden of perfect recall. A machine that never forgets becomes rigid, its pathways overgrown with the ivy of outdated lessons. Like a scribe whose parchment has filled, it has no room for new stories. So engineers build in forgetting not as failure but as feature. They call it regularization, this gentle erosion. It works like the tide smoothing sandcastles, leaving only the strongest structures standing. The machine sacrifices some precision to remain adaptable, trading the perfect answer of yesterday for good enough answers tomorrow. In this forgetting, it finds freedom, the space to reinterpret, to see familiar problems with fresh circuits. There is a deep wisdom here. Human minds forget constantly. Not just facts, but the feel of last winter's cold, the sharp edges of old griefs. This forgetting isn't failure. It's what allows you to walk forward unburdened. Machines now mimic this grace, their memories designed to fade just enough at just the right time. Yet the balance is delicate. Forget too much, and the pond reflects nothing. Forget too little, and the water grows stagnant. The sweet spot lies somewhere between, where the machine retains just enough to recognize patterns, but remains open to their rearrangement. Where it can say, I've seen this before, while still leaving room to add, but perhaps this time is different. As the last echoes of memory dissolve like mist, you're left wondering, what happens when the pond must reflect not just what was, but what might be? The water stills, preparing to show you not memories, but possibilities. Loving this? Hit that subscribe button to keep up with our videos. Also share this video with your family and friends. The oracle of probability. The oldest human longing is to see beyond the horizon. We've searched for it in tea leaves, in stars, in the flight patterns of birds. Now we find it in matrices, grids of numbers that shimmer with potential futures. A machine predicting the weather doesn't know tomorrow's storms any more than ancient augurs did. But where humans saw omens, machines see correlations, subtle fingerprints of cause and effect written in data. Watch how it works. The system consumes thousands of past weather patterns, digesting pressure systems and humidity like a scholar studying old prophecies. But instead of divination, it performs extrapolation, extending the curve of what's known into what might be. Each prediction starts as a cloud of possibilities, a probabilistic haze where every outcome exists simultaneously. Then, through layers of computation, the fog clears just enough to show the most probable path. This isn't magic. It's more like watching someone learn a melody by ear. At first, their guesses are wrong more than right. But with each iteration, the mistakes grow smaller, the predictions land closer. The machine never achieves certainty, only decreasing uncertainty. Its confidence is always a percentage, never a promise. You might ask, how is this different from human intuition? The answer lies in scale. Where a seasoned farmer predicts rain by aching joints and the scent of soil, the machine cross-references 17,000 similar mornings you could never consciously recall. It's the difference between smelling one rose and memorizing every blossom in the garden's history. Yet, for all their calculations, machines still face the fundamental mystery of time. They can tell you what's likely, never what's certain. The future remains a locked room. Probability lets us peek through the keyhole, but the door won't open until we arrive. As the probabilities shimmer like heat haze on the horizon, another question forms. What happens when the machine encounters something truly new? When the future refuses to follow the past's well-worn paths? The numbers tremble at the edges, sensing the approach of the unknowable. The language of silence imagines standing in a forest at dusk. The birds have gone quiet, but their absence tells you something. Perhaps a storm approaches, or a predator walks nearby. This is how machines learn to interpret silence. Not as emptiness, but as information carved in negative space. When a patient skips their monthly check-in, the machine doesn't simply note the missing data. It asks what this omission might imply. Is this the beginning of disengagement, or merely a vacation? The gaps between credit card transactions form patterns as telling as the purchases themselves. Even in speech recognition, the milliseconds of hesitation before answering carry weight. These are the unspoken italics of human behavior, the invisible ink of intention. The technical term is null value imputation, but think of it rather like a musician understanding rests in a musical score. The beats where no note sounds are precisely measured, deliberately placed. They are not failures of composition, but essential elements of rhythm. In the same way, machines learn that sometimes what matters most is what doesn't happen. This understanding comes gradually. Early systems treated silence as noise to be filtered out. But newer algorithms recognize that absence has its own grammar, that a message left on read communicates as clearly as any words, that the blank spaces in a form might be its most honest answers. They develop a sensitivity to contextual absence, understanding that a missing heartbeat means something different in a hospital than in a yoga studio. Yet this comprehension has limits. Where humans intuitively grasp layered silences, the difference between awed silence and angry silence, machines must learn these distinctions through repeated exposure. They become fluent in silence only by studying countless examples of what came before and after the quiet moments. As you contemplate these wordless conversations, a deeper question emerges. When silence speaks so clearly, what happens when we don't like what it's saying? The air hums with unvoiced concerns, like a piano with its dampers lifted, vibrating with notes no one played. The shadow of bias. Imagine teaching a child language using only old books. They would learn not just words, but the unspoken assumptions pressed between the lines, which voices matter, which stories get told. Machines learn the same way. They absorb our histories like sponges, drinking in both our wisdom and our blind spots, until the water itself carries the taste of our limitations. The trouble begins innocently. A facial recognition system trained primarily on one ethnicity struggles with others. A hiring algorithm, fed decades of resumes, learns to prefer masculine-coded words. These aren't flaws in the machine's logic, but perfect reflections of patterns that already existed, patterns we might not have noticed until the machine made them undeniable. Like a flashlight beam revealing dust in the air, the algorithms show us prejudices that were always there, floating in our data. Bias in machines is rarely deliberate. It emerges from missing data as much as from existing data. The medical AI trained mostly on male patients. The voice assistant that understands certain accents better than others. These gaps create shadows where whole populations become invisible to the system. The machine doesn't discriminate, it simply doesn't see what it wasn't shown. Yet there's a peculiar gift in this uncomfortable mirror. Machines quantify our biases, measure them in percentages and confidence intervals. Where human prejudice hides behind polite excuses, algorithmic bias shows up as clear statistical disparities. The numbers don't lie about which groups get loans approved, which faces get recognized, which voices get heard. The solution isn't simple because the problem wasn't simple to create. Like cleaning a stained glass window pane by pane, engineers must examine each component, the training data, the model architecture, the testing metrics. Some try to debias the algorithms, while others focus on creating better, more representative data from the start. All of them grapple with the same realization. We're not just teaching machines to see the world, we're teaching them how we see the world with all our imperfections. As you watch these digital mirrors being polished, a deeper question surfaces. Can we ever create something truly impartial, or will every system inevitably carry the fingerprints of its makers? The glass trembles slightly, awaiting its next reflection. The symphony of cooperation. Close your eyes and imagine a jazz ensemble at midnight. The saxophone takes the lead, improvising a cascade of notes, while the bass provides steady rhythm beneath. Neither could create this magic alone. The beauty lives in their conversation. This is how humans and machines might dance together. Not as competitors, but as co-creators, each playing to their strengths. Machines bring perfect pitch for patterns. They hear the subtle repetitions in the data that escape human ears, the way certain musical notes predict heart rate changes, or how slight variations in bridge vibrations foretell structural stress. But humans bring the why behind the what. We supply context where data is silent, morality where math is mute. Together, the duet becomes greater than its parts. Consider medical diagnosis. An AI might scan thousands of X-rays in minutes, flagging potential tumors with superhuman accuracy. But the doctor brings what the machine cannot, knowing when to question the algorithm's confidence, understanding how a patient's history changes what likely means, recognizing when statistical probability must yield to human dignity. The machine says could be, the human says what if, and between them truth emerges. This partnership requires careful choreography. Like musicians tuning their instruments, humans and machines must learn each other's languages. The AI must explain its reasoning in ways we can understand, not just percentages but visualizations, analogies, confidence scales. We, in turn, must learn when to trust and when to doubt, developing an intuition for the machine's blind spots even as it reveals ours. The most beautiful moments come when roles blur. A graphic designer starts with an AI's suggested layout, then bends it to her vision. A scientist follows an algorithm's unexpected correlation into new research territory. Like jazz musicians trading solos, the boundaries between composed and improvised, between programmed and inspired, begin to shimmer and dissolve. As the last notes of collaboration fade into the night, a final question lingers like a sustained chord. What happens when this duet becomes so seamless we forget who is playing which part? The music hovers on the edge of a new movement, waiting to be discovered. The dream of generality. Watch a child at the beach. She doesn't need instructions to know that sand will shift underfoot, that waves chase and retreat, that seagulls will scatter if she runs toward them. This knowledge wasn't programmed. It was absorbed through endless experimentation with a world that rewards curiosity. Now observe a machine learning to navigate that same beach. It must be taught what wet means, how wave differs from ripple, why birds react to movement. For all its processing power, it lacks the child's secret, the ability to learn anything about everything. Artificial intelligence today excels at narrow tasks, identifying tumors, predicting traffic, translating languages. But each skill exists in isolation, like books shelved in separate rooms. A human, by contrast, connects everything. The way a door hinges squeak resembles a violin's high note. How the smell of rain on concrete recalls a childhood sidewalk. This web of associations is what scientists call general intelligence. The mind's ability to apply kitchen logic to cosmology, to see metaphors where machines see only data. The challenge isn't processing power, but understanding. When a machine recognizes a cat, it's matching patterns of pixels to patterns in memory. When a human sees a cat, they also imagine its potential to purr or scratch. Recall nursery rhymes about fiddlers, brace for possible allergies. The image connects to a constellation of meanings, sensations, and possibilities. Researchers try to bridge this gap with ever larger neural networks, training models on everything from Renaissance paintings to quantum physics papers. Yet something fundamental remains missing, the intrinsic motivation to learn, the why behind a child's endless what-if questions. Machines optimize for goals we set. Humans create their own purposes. Perhaps the closest analog is a library where all books are available, but no one feels compelled to read. The machine contains multitudes, yet cares for none of them. It can describe sunlight but doesn't bask in it, can analyze laughter but never feels the urge to join in. As twilight deepens outside the window, you wonder, if we one day succeed in building a machine that truly thinks like a child, will we finally understand our own minds or only grasp how much we've taken for granted? The question lingers like the last light of day, neither fully present nor entirely gone. The reflection in the machine. All this time we believed we were building machines in our image, only to discover we've been sketching a self-portrait. Every limitation we encounter in artificial intelligence becomes a flashlight beam shining back on the contours of human thought. The machine struggles to generalize, to truly understand, to feel curiosity. These aren't just engineering challenges. They're signposts marking the frontier between calculation and consciousness. Consider the simple act of holding a cup of tea. A robot might analyze weight distribution, temperature gradients, and material stresses. But you feel the warmth seep into your palms. Remember who gave you the mug. Sense when it's half empty without looking. These layers of meaning, physical, emotional, symbolic, are what the machine cannot replicate. Not because it lacks processing power, but because it doesn't care. And in that difference, we glimpse something essential about ourselves. The history of AI has been a series of humbling revelations. First, we thought chess was the pinnacle of intelligence until machines mastered it. Then we believed creativity was safe, until algorithms composed music that stirs souls. Each time they surpass our expectations, we redefine intelligence, pushing the goalposts further into what we consider uniquely human. Yet with every barrier broken, the question grows louder. If thinking can be mechanized, what remains special about the organic mind? Perhaps the answer lies not in what machines can do, but in what they long to do. They have no equivalent to your midnight wonderings, to the way a scent can unravel a memory you didn't know you kept. A machine processes information, you experience it. The distinction feels spiritual, but it may simply be biological, the difference between simulating and being. As you trace this boundary, a curious thought emerges. In trying to create artificial minds, we've accidentally cataloged the irreducible mysteries of our own. The machine's perfect recall shows us the value of forgetting. Its relentless logic highlights the power of intuition. Its inability to get bored reveals why boredom might be essential. Each failure reflects back an insight about human cognition we'd taken for granted. The screen darkens, the processors cool, but the questions linger like afterimages. You realize this was never just about teaching machines to think. It was about understanding what thinking means. And as the night deepens around you, that understanding feels both closer and more mysterious than ever before. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share. See you next time.